Marvel's S.W.O.R.D, the Sentient World Observation and Response Department, is the intelligence equivalent of S.H.I.E.L.D., dealing with the extraterrestrial threats of the Marvel cosmic scene. Whereas S.H.I.E.L.D. has been with the Marvel Universe since the Jack and Stan Silver Age, S.W.O.R.D debuted in 2004's Astonishing X-Men by Joss Whedon and John Cassaday. Since that time, S.W.O.R.D, and most specifically the unit's delightfully no-nonsense commander, Abigail Brand, have been an integrated yet sporadic part of the Marvel Universe fabric, although most commonly tied to the pages of X-Men. Today I'll answer, what's the history of S.W.O.R.D, and what are the essential reads in the Marvel canon? What is S.W.O.R.D's connection to mutants and the X-Men? What should we expect from the Ewing and Schiti S.W.O.R.D debut coming up soon? And theories and predictions for what's to come in X-Men, The Dawn of X, and of course, the Marvel cosmic scene as S.W.O.R.D becomes a mutant-owned entity moving forward. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. You are listening to Krakin Krakoa's History of S.W.O.R.D. If you like Comic Book Herald YouTube channel or Krakin Krakoa, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing. It helps me out a great deal. You can find full X-Men and comic book reading orders on comicbookherald.com, including an essential history of S.W.O.R.D I'll be publishing there. Spoilers for Discuss Comics may follow. Astonishing X-Men is one of the comics that really renewed my passion for X-Men as a quote-unquote adult, a standout evergreen work that also just so happens to double as the origins of S.W.O.R.D. Abigail Brand in S.W.O.R.D's debut is particularly interesting to me as she becomes a key player in the Dawn of X because in Gifted, the first story arc of Whedon and Cassaday's Astonishing X-Men, Brand's compromise with S.W.O.R.D, an alien of Breakworld, is that in order to prevent Breakworld's destruction of Earth, S.W.O.R.D is allowed to create and disseminate a cure for mutants. So for as long as Brand's been an uneasy ally to mutants and as half-human, half-alien can empathize with some degree of their otherness from Homo sapiens, she begins as a borderline antagonist. She does not have an anti-mutant agenda per se, but she was willing to knowingly allow the eradication of Homo Superior if it meant protecting Earth, at least in her debut. In Astonishing X-Men, Brand is very much the uber-pragmatic Nick Fury of space, very much willing to potentially sell out mutant kind, or at the very least Colossus, in order to prevent the annihilation of Earth by the alien Breakworld. Brand and X-Men have a very contentious relationship. The X-Men do not much care for her, Beast's eventual romantic entanglement notwithstanding. As Astonishing X-Men progresses, Brand relies more and more on the X-Men to help resolve the Breakworld situation and their culture's prophecy that Colossus will result in the destruction of their world. Despite their early antagonism, Brand will continue to work closely with the X-Men throughout the rest of S.W.O.R.D's appearances, in part driven because the half-alien, half-human's human half is also mutant. At the end of Unstoppable, the final arc in the Whedon-Cassaday era, Brand puts the moves on Hank the Tank and offers him a role with S.W.O.R.D, a crucial relationship through the remainder of the 2010s. Likewise, Brand reveals Lockheed is actually a S.W.O.R.D mole in the X-Mansion, which is quite the development for our little alien friend, who of course joined up and is bonded with Kate Pryde way back in the X-Men's original Brood saga in the 1980s. Even following the Whedon and Cassaday run, Agent Brand and S.W.O.R.D effectively live in the pages of Astonishing X-Men until Secret Invasion circa 2008, when a cosmic infiltration is way too big to let S.W.O.R.D stick to the mutant corner of the Marvel-verse, and of course they become a key player in Marvel at large. Secret Invasion is a real low point for Agent Brand, as her core purpose of preventing an all-out alien invasion of Earth is shattered. Brand plays a role in the core event series, but my favorite entry is a short story in the Who Do You Trust one-shot, written by Mike Carey. We get a little more insight into Brand's rise to the head of S.W.O.R.D, alongside some details about mistakes she makes in overlooking the hunch of Agent deemed suspicious of Skrull communications. There's some interesting fallout from the event across the Marvel U as well, such as Abigail Brand turning to Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, and making her a Skrull-hunting agent of S.W.O.R.D in the event's aftermath. This is when writer Brian Michael Bendis takes the concept established in Astonishing X-Men and brings Abigail Brand into the Marvel Universe really as a whole, as a counterpart to S.H.I.E.L.D in many ways. The short-lived descent for Brand leads to the most interesting period of S.W.O.R.D in the first solo miniseries set in the invasion's aftermath during Norman Osborn's dark reign of the Marvel Universe and all of its institutions. S.W.O.R.D is 5 issues that ran from November 2009 to March 2010, more or less directly spinning out of the work built in the pages of Astonishing X-Men. It's a bit misleading, but the X-Men ties with the agency are so strong, the collected volumes of this story, reprinted right now actually, in advance of 2020 S.W.O.R.D number 1, are called X-Men S.W.O.R.D No Time to Breathe. And the story is by writer Kieran Gillen, artist Stephen Sanders, inks by Craig Young, colors by Matt Wilson, letters by Dave Lanfear, and covers by John Cassaday with Laura Martin colors, and then jumping to Mike Del Mundo covers, starting with issue number 4. The first issue does have a backup here by writer Kieran Gillen and longtime artistic collaborator Jamie McKelvey. This is not Kieran Gillen's first Marvel work. There are some short stories in Beta Ray Bill Godhunter, the 3-issue cosmic story, but this is early in Gillen's run with Marvel and kind of as a really well-known creator before he did any work on Thor and the broader X-Men. It is interesting to consider this work if it had been Gillen and McKelvey together, who did, again, just that backup, with works like Phonogram kind of coming alongside this, but then now they've done an Image comic series called The Wicked and Divine, which is a huge hit, as well as their Young Avengers run with Marvel. They are kind of a creative institution alongside the likes of, let's say, Brubaker and Phillips. Kieran Gillen's a big name in comics right now, definitely like he is a big indie and Marvel creator. I've been saying this since House of X and Powers of 10, but a Gillen Sinister solo series would be absolutely incredible, considering his role in really reinventing that character in the way that Jonathan Hickman extremely ran with in the pages, again, of Hawks and Pox. But going back to S.W.O.R.D, the first issue of S.W.O.R.D, it's a stellar, fast-paced exploration of a day in the life of Agent Brand, set following Secret Invasion during Dark Reign, with Norman Asborn commanding Hammer and Agent Henry Peter Gyrick joining as this undesired co-commander of S.W.O.R.D. Death's Head, a Marvel UK creation and cult icon himself, shows up for the bounty on Abigail Brand's half-brother Lothi, setting off a helter-skelter series of action that drives this very tight and engaging read. Seriously, it's only 5 issues. It's easy. I would highly recommend everybody check this out, either in trade or in Marvel Unlimited. While Brand and Beast are distracted by the events of Death's Head showing up, for example, Gyrick calls for the immediate removal of all literal aliens from Earth. It's an extremely relevant and kind of like prescient take on what would happen with these new individuals in charge, with a much stronger conservative bent towards making Earth for Earthlings. So Gyrick puts in these protocols to apprehend aliens that includes a lot of really well-known aliens across the Marvel Universe, like Novar, Adam X, Carolina Dean, Hepzibah, and more. Gyrick turns to Unit, this alien robot entity that has like perfect strategy, but at the expense of much human life in a lot of cases, for ideas on apprehending the mutant Warlock as well. At its most interesting, this is the potential S.W.O.R.D has, a series that can grapple with the entirety of Marvel Cosmic from the perspective of an agency literally built to do just that. It can tackle the whole Marvel Cosmic scene so successfully. The other thing that S.W.O.R.D does really well, if you read these 5 issues, is it reminds us of a time back when Beast, aka Hank McCoy, was extremely likable. It's been a minute. Honestly, this might be like kind of the last time. I guess Wolverine and the X-Men comes after this, and I think Beast was still generally okay at that point as well. But as we've seen in the Dawn of X, particularly in the pages of X-Force, Beast is extremely far gone. I'll be very curious to see, Beast and Abigail Brand have a really wonderful relationship, and it's romantic, but it's also professional in the pages of S.W.O.R.D. I'm really curious to see like where they stand together, because Abigail Brand helps Beast, I think, in a lot of ways. It shows what makes him so likable, but the character is not the same as he was a decade ago, as we read him now in the Dawn of X. Other characters that you might know from X-Men, Lockheed is in a terrible state as we enter S.W.O.R.D because Katie Pryde is missing. I won't, I guess, spoil the end of Astonishing X-Men, the Whedon Cassaday arc, to reveal what that means, but Lockheed has turned to the bottle. It's definitely a pitiful thing to see a little dragon sipping the whiskey hard. Lockheed was Brand's sleeper agent in the X-Men, as I mentioned. We haven't really gotten a ton from him in Marauders. There's a few moments here and there, especially in the wake of Shaw's attack on Kate Pryde there, but S.W.O.R.D would be a good opportunity to continue exploring this take on the Tylian alien dragon. I really like him as a special agent of the S.W.O.R.D institution. All told, S.W.O.R.D is a fantastic 5-issue mini, one of my favorite comics from this era. I ranked it one of my top 100 from 98 to 2015, and a great portent of things to come if this concept is given support beyond a quick 5 issues. I do think Abigail Brand, too, is a character that shines most brightly when the deck is stacked against her a little bit, and S.W.O.R.D itself is slipping from her fingertips. We see this in the mini, where Gyrick is trying to usurp her power. We know that she doesn't quite have the standing that she's had in the past, but she's still in control, and we see that, kind of dominant leadership come through as she deals with all of the myriad problems that are coming her way. Elsewhere, Brand primarily plays a role in the pages of Astonishing X-Men and Uncanny X-Men, particularly as a favorite of creator Kieran Gillen. Prior to Gillen's X-Men run, Brand does also notably get infested by Brood and help the X-Men make contact with good old Lil Brew, everyone's favorite compassionate broodling, and now, of course, as we know, spoiler alert, King of the Brood. As with most Brood infestations, it got better. From there, Gillen has Brand and S.W.O.R.D take the late decade X-Men back to Breakworld for a sequel to the Whedon Cassaday era. It's far from essential, but if you enjoy S.W.O.R.D and the character of Abigail Brand, it was definitely interesting for me to jump back into, especially this Kieran Gillen written Uncanny X-Men run, to get a little more good Brand content as they deal with S.W.O.R.D's world from Breakworld, not S.W.O.R.D himself. From about 2011 to 2015, my favorite use of Agent Brand and S.W.O.R.D comes in the pages of X-Men Legacy, written by Cy Spurrier with a focus on Professor X's son, Legion. In issues number 19 to 22, Agent Brand captures Legion and tries him for space crimes so that he may face space justice. It's a pretty good series. It definitely will help to have read X-Men Legacy up to this point, I think, because it's calling back to a lot of things that have happened in the series. I mean, in addition to Brand's role dealing out her own brand of law in defense of Legion's cosmic ramifications, she seems extremely okay with Legion being executed for his possible crimes, for example. There's a really interesting development where the imprisoned Legion is forced to fend off the Shadow Phoenix in his mindscape. As presented, the Shadow Phoenix is a mildly less powerful version of the Phoenix Force, but still cosmically strong. Now, after David Haller fends off this apparent Shadow Phoenix, it's later revealed that the entity is just a psychic projection and not actually real. But the Shadow Phoenix is still a really cool idea. I love this idea a lot, especially if you start tying in, like, what if Shadow King had some of the Phoenix Force and merge those two ideas together? But again, just the idea that the Phoenix has a shadow entity out there, pretty cool. I might like to see this explored some more in the future, even though it was kind of a fake out in that story. Elsewhere, as we kind of ramp up the Through Secret Wars agenda, it's a part of the Secret Wars 2015 style Battle World fabric, but Gillen, again, would hone in on Brand in the pages of the Siege 4-issue event tie-in, one of the best tie-ins of the all-time great event. That's right, I'm saying it here. I've said it in many other places. 2015 Secret Wars is straight up my favorite comic book event of all time. If you have not read the event, you gotta kind of read the whole Hickman verse to get there. It definitely helps, but definitely read the Siege tie-in when you get there as well for some good Abigail Brand. Following the events of Marvel's 2015 Secret Wars, S.W.O.R.D has disbanded in favor of the Alpha Flight space program, primarily headed up by Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, with Agent Brand in a supporting advisory role. This revamped space program gets utilized primarily in the pages of Captain Marvel's nigh infinitely relaunched solo series. Seriously, she had so many solo series from like 2015 to 2020, and the Al Ewing written Ultimates, which remains one of the best Marvel cosmic books of the 2000s. Unsurprisingly, Agent Brand is less than thrilled with Carol's new role in the reconfiguring of S.W.O.R.D. For my money, Brand has been kind of stuck in a rut since the rise of Alpha Flight here, and the recent breakaway from that command structure will definitely do the character and the role of S.W.O.R.D a whole galaxy of good. I think having Abigail Brand as a straight-up second fiddle to Carol Danvers was not a great fit, at least for me as a reader. Most recently, in the pages of Kelly Thompson written Captain Marvel, Carol returned leadership of the operation to Abigail Brand. Following the events of Empire during the wedding reception of Billy Kaplan and Teddy Altman, Brand made it known that not looping her in on the deeply cosmic events of Empire that happened here in 2020 made it impossible to do her job, that Carol of all people should know better, and that effectively she's out of here. This issue ends with an epic tease setting up the upcoming Ewing and Schiti S.W.O.R.D, of course, that we are talking about here today and that we now know will launch in December 2020. But we know Abigail Brand basically said because the Avengers and their ilk could not trust her with this information to defend space, she's going to take matters into her own hands. As she said, that's why I'm building something better. The road to the series starts in the ongoing Ten of Swords event, where Saturnine teases the relevance of S.W.O.R.D's peak headquarters, and Cable, Cyclops, and Jean Grey investigate, only to find that the headquarters have been overrun and conquered by this new alien alien Vespora. We'll likely see more details about S.W.O.R.D's relevance as Ten of Swords concludes. Again, it would be very strange to me if Saturn teased this stationed cable without a hidden purpose or agenda, but either way, we know heading into Ewing and Schiti's run that the crew of the Peak has been completely destroyed, leaving it open for a new mutant-driven operation. I mean, as far as I can tell, based on what we've learned about it, what happened to S.W.O.R.D, like, all of the agents and staff have died. So the new S.W.O.R.D will basically have to repopulate the crew entirely, which might kind of make sense given the fact that they might want it entirely mutant-focused. The roster for the upcoming S.W.O.R.D series at launch includes Abigail Brand, Magneto, Mother Flippin' WizKid, Manifold, Cable, Frenzy, and everyone's least favorite mutant, Fabian Cortez. What are the mutants of S.W.O.R.D going to be doing? What does this mean for the Earth's human space protection? Well, I've outlined most of where I think this will be going in my video on how Hickman's X-Men will conquer the galaxy, back when I precogged this series, as you may remember, but the general gist of it is it's time for mutant kinds to begin their outreach into space, whether it is just for cosmic protection or whether it is also looking into how can alien mutants of alien races, help them out in their quest to, essentially gain power and become defendable or defend themselves against the encroaching threat of Sentinels and Nimrod technology. Right? And there's a lot more that goes into it, which I highly recommend people check out the How Hickman's X-Men Will Conquer the Galaxy for the whole thing. But S.W.O.R.D is how we go to the stars. I mean, one thing we're seeing in the Ten of Swords event right now is threats come from without, right? There are all the threats of Earth, but then there's a threat from this other dimension. And how do you protect yourself about these threats that are going to come from space as well? It's not like the X-Men don't have any familiarity with space, right? With all the entanglements they've had with the Shi'ar in the past. So S.W.O.R.D is a way for them to say, okay, let's stop thinking small. Let's think beyond Earth. How do we make things bigger and better? How do we break the rules? And S.W.O.R.D is a great opportunity to do that. I can't wait for S.W.O.R.D. I think Al Ewing is obviously a super hot creator right now. Immortal Hulk is one of the best Marvel books of definitely of the 2000s, and I mean, frankly, it's going to go down as an all-timer once it's all said and done. And, Ewing's currently writing Guardians of the Galaxy as well. So he's got a hold on what Marvel Cosmic is going to be and how mutants, the X-Men, and S.W.O.R.D are going to fit into that. I think it's going to be fascinating to see, and it's going to be, it's one of the biggest series launches of 2020 and into 2021. The second issue will tie in with Marvel's King in Black event, so S.W.O.R.D is going to immediately go in the tie-in route, which is, I don't know, like that definitely sets off some warning bells. That can be a bad thing, but I have some confidence here that we'll still get good stories out of the series early. So let me know what you think. What do you think about S.W.O.R.D? What do you think about this upcoming series? What are your questions, theories, ideas about the Dawn of X, and where the cosmic angle is going? I want to hear it all in the comments here. And again, if you like this content here on Krakin Krakoa, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing. For those of you who are curious, I do have a reading list here for S.W.O.R.D. I'll put this up on comicbookherald.com. I'll put just the list here in the show notes if you want some recommended reading for ways to explore S.W.O.R.D. and specifically the character of Abigail Brand. And again, I recommend doing so via Marvel Unlimited in general, just because it is the most affordable way to do so. But of course, as you know, you actually want to collect things. I think S.W.O.R.D 1 through 5, good collection to have. Good series of stories that I was quite delighted reading again here for this video. Thanks as always to Patreon support. I want to thank patreon.com/comicbookherald supporters in the mysterious benefactors tier. In particular, these are the individuals who have joined Comic Book Herald support at $10 a month, which is extremely generous, and they get their name shouted out here for being so awesome. Thank you, Ron Paul Kirkley. Thank you, Jesse W. Thank you, Professor Pride. Thank you, Steve Brennan, Cole Weathers, Martin Lopez. Thank you, Chris Isidro, Brent Bowser, and Professor X3769. I will also shout out here if you want all Krakin Krakoa reviews of single issues in podcast form. I do not release all of them on the Best Comics Ever Comic Book Herald podcast, but I do put all of them up now on the Patreon. So for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to podcast versions of all of these videos if that floats your boat for all the reviews, okay? Thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Dave. You can find my stuff at comicbookherald.com, at Comic Book Herald, pretty much anywhere on social. Look for the Best Comics Ever in My Marvelous Year podcast for more from me. But thanks, everybody, for listening, and as always, enjoy the comics.